At the will reading, my billionaire grandpa left me $27 billion. My parents came back for it. The first time I saw my parents again, my mother was fixing her lipstick in the reflection of the courthouse window. Not inside, where the security guards and clerks could see her. Not in the restroom. Outside, half turned toward the glass like she was waiting for a photographer. My father stood beside her with his hands folded behind his back, wearing a suit I'd never seen before. Dark charcoal, sharp shoulders, the kind of tailoring that assumes people will make room for you. He checked his watch twice in 30 seconds. Like time was something he could pressure into behaving. I stopped a few steps away and let them notice me on their own. They didn't, at first. To them, I'd always been the quiet one, the easy one, the one who didn't require follow-up. I held the folder tighter under my arm. It wasn't thick, just the essentials: my ID, the letter from my grandfather's attorney, the email chain confirming the date and time, and the copy of the death certificate I'd picked up 2 days ago because no one else had bothered.
A gust of wind cut through the plaza.
My mother's hair moved. She frowned at it like it was misbehaving. Then, she finally looked up. Her eyes flicked over me like she was reading a label. Same face as mine in the bone structure, different choices in everything else. "Oh," she said, voice bright with surprise that wasn't surprise. "There you are." My father's gaze landed a half-second later, and he smiled with his mouth only. "Lena," he said, like we'd spoken last week. I nodded once. I didn't hug them. I didn't step forward. The space between us stayed intact because I didn't close it. My mother laughed lightly, as if the distance was a cute misunderstanding. "You look responsible," she said. "That's good!" It was the kind of line people used when they wanted credit for how you turned out, without any involvement in the process. Behind them, the courthouse steps were crowded with a mix of people. Lawyers, families, security, a few reporters who were always sniffing around anything tied to the Ashford name. My grandfather had been careful about his privacy, but money attracts attention the way light attracts moths. I glanced past my parents and spotted a woman in a navy blazer holding a tablet. She was standing near the entrance with posture that said she could manage a room without raising her voice. That would be Ms. Raskin, the estate attorney. The email signature had been precise. The instructions had been precise. Everything about my grandfather's world had been precise, except the people. "Are you here alone?" my mother asked, leaning in as if she expected me to be flustered by the question. "I'm here," I said. My father's smile widened. "We're glad you reached out." I didn't correct him. I hadn't reached out. Miss Raskin had. The first contact I'd received after the funeral was a formal email titled, "Ashford Estate, will reading attendance confirmation." The funeral itself had been small, by design. My grandfather's instructions were strict. No live stream and no press. Limited guest list. I'd sat in the second row next to a woman I didn't know, an assistant maybe, and watched the closed casket while men in expensive coats shook hands like they were closing deals. My parents hadn't come to that. They'd come to this. My mother linked her arm through my father's as if they were arriving at a gala. "We didn't want you to feel overwhelmed," she said. "These things can be intense." I looked at her hand. Her nails were fresh, pale pink, squared tips. The kind of manicure you schedule when you know you'll be holding papers for cameras. "I'm fine," I said. My father nodded approvingly, as if I passed a test. "Good! Good!" "Because we'll need to be steady today." "We?" I asked, tone neutral. My mother answered like it was obvious. "As a family!" That word, family, always arrived right before someone tried to take something. We walked inside together. Or they walked and I matched their pace, staying half a step behind, watching how people reacted to them. The security guard at the metal detector looked up longer than necessary. My father gave him a practiced nod. My mother offered a smile that implied they belonged here more than anyone else. I set my folder in the tray, stepped through, collected it again. Simple actions. Controlled. Familiar. I'd learned to move quietly in rooms that weren't built for me. In the hallway leading to the conference room, a cluster of people waited. 2 lawyers, a man with silver hair and a visible cufflink logo, a woman in a cream coat tapping on her phone. They all looked up when my parents arrived, like my parents were the headline. My mother lifted her chin. My father adjusted his tie. No one looked at me until Ms. Raskin stepped forward. "Lena Carter?" she asked. "Yes." Her eyes flicked to my parents, then back to me. She didn't smile, but her tone softened slightly. "Thank you for coming." "We'll begin shortly. Please, this way." She opened the door and gestured me in first. My mother's smile tightened, just a fraction, like she'd been denied a small courtesy she expected. Inside, the conference room was plain. Long table, black chairs, a pitcher of water, legal pads stacked neatly, no portraits, no grandeur, just paperwork and consequences. A court reporter sat at the far end, setting up. 2 witnesses stood near the wall. Everything about the space said, "What happens here becomes record." My mother chose a seat near the center, close to Ms. Raskin, and patted the chair beside her like I was a child being told where to sit. "Come," she said softly. "You're good with money." I didn't move toward that seat. I sat 2 chairs away, leaving a gap. My father's eyes flicked to it, then away. He sat on my mother's other side, forming a neat trio with me, slightly out of alignment. Miss Raskin took her place and opened a slim binder. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to clarify who is present and in what capacity." She read names, the witnesses, the court reporter, an additional attorney representing interested parties. My mother sat a little straighter at that phrase. Then Miss Raskin looked directly at me again. "Lena Carter is present as the named beneficiary and executor designate per the Ashford Trust documents." The words landed quietly, but my mother's inhale wasn't quiet. "Executor," my father repeated, like he was tasting it. My mother turned to me with a smile that was supposed to look proud. "Well, she said, voice light. "Isn't that something?" I kept my expression steady. I hadn't known about executor status until I read the email attachments the night before. I'd stayed up until 3:12 a.m., reviewing every page, making notes, cross-checking definitions I didn't fully understand, and writing down questions in the margin. I wasn't surprised my grandfather had done it. I was surprised he'd made it official, Ms. Raskin continued. To be clear, today's reading is the summary of provisions. Full documents will be provided to relevant parties. Any disputes will follow proper legal channels. "Of course," my father said quickly. "We're not here to make trouble," my mother laughed, the sound polished. "We're here to support Lena. Support Lena," another word that always arrived before pressure. "Miss Arip." Raskin nodded once, then turned a page. Harold Ashford executed the most recent will and trust amendments on September 14, 2025. These documents have been verified and witnessed. September 14th. I wrote it down anyway. My mother leaned toward me, whispering as if she was sharing something intimate. "He was confused near the end," she said. "You know that, right?" I looked at her. He wasn't confused when he called me on my birthday in October. Her mouth stayed smiling, but her eyes sharpened. "Sweetheart," she murmured, "you don't know what you don't know." I didn't respond. "Ms. Raskin's voice continued, steady and unhurried. She described the creation of the Ashford Trust decades earlier, the restructuring after an acquisition, the legal separation of assets, the existence of several charitable foundations and business holdings. My father listened with his hands folded, nodding at the appropriate moments, like a man watching his own resume being read aloud. My mother's knee bounced under the table. She tried to hide it. She couldn't. Then, Mrs. Press, Raskin reached the section everyone was waiting for. "The primary remainder beneficiary," she said, "is Lena Carter." My mother's head snapped slightly. My father's shoulders stiffened. Miss Raskin didn't pause for their reactions. "The remainder interest includes controlling positions in Ashford Holdings, Ashford Capital Partners, associated real estate portfolios, and liquid reserves held across multiple institutions." My mother's lips parted. My father's jaw tightened. "Miss Dad said," Raskin looked down at the binder, then up. "The estimated total value as of the most recent audit and valuations is $27 billion. No one moved for a full second. The court reporter's fingers continued to type, the only sound in the room, as if the number itself wasn't allowed to break the rules of reality. My mother recovered first. She let out a breath that was half laughed, half disbelief. "Oh my God," she said softly, turning to my father. "Harold! Harold actually did it!" My father stared at Miss Raskin. His voice came out controlled, but it had an edge. "That can't be correct."
Biz.
Raskin's tone didn't change. "It is correct." My mother turned fully toward me, her expression rearranging itself into something warm and amazed, like she was seeing me for the first time. Then she reached across the gap I'd left and placed her hand on my forearm. Her touch was light, possessive without pressure, public enough to be seen by everyone in the room. "My baby," she whispered, loud enough for the witnesses to hear. "Do you understand what this means? We need to talk properly. As a family." My father nodded, his eyes on me now, calculating. "This is bigger than you. There are responsibilities."
My mother squeezed my arm once. "You'll need guidance."
Guidance, support, family. They said the words like they were gifts, Miss Raskin continued reading. But my parents barely listened now. They were already constructing a future in their heads, and in that future my role was simple: hand over what they believed belonged to them. I didn't pull my arm away. I didn't flinch. I let her hand rest there while my mind did what it always did when I felt pressure. It slowed down. I looked at Miss Raskin's binder. The date, the language, the structure. The fact that my grandfather had not just left me money, he'd left me control. He knew exactly who would show up when the number was spoken, and he'd prepared for it. My mother leaned closer, her voice turning playful, almost joking, like she didn't want to look desperate. "I guess we're worth a phone call now, huh?" she said with a small laugh, as if she was teasing me. The witnesses heard it, the court reporter heard it, even Ms. Raskin's eyes flicked up for a fraction of a second. My father added, smiling in the same way he'd smiled outside. "Don't take it personally. We just didn't think Harold would go this route." I turned my gaze to my mother's hand on my arm. "I could have moved. I could have said something sharp. I could have asked where they were when rent was due, when my car broke down, when I worked night shifts and took community college classes because four-year tuition wasn't a conversation in our house. But impulsive reactions were what people like them used as proof that you weren't ready. So I kept still. I waited." Miss Raskin finished the section and closed the binder. "There are additional provisions," she said, "including conditions regarding governance, confidentiality, and distribution timelines. Miss Prest mentioned contact. Carter will receive full copies of all documents today." My father's eyes narrowed. "Only her? Only her?" Miss Raskin confirmed. My mother's smile froze again. "Ms.
Raskin stood. We're adjourned.
Ms. Carter, please stay for a private consult." My parents stood too quickly, like they could follow by force of proximity. My mother's hand slid from my arm to my shoulder, and she leaned in as if she was about to kiss my cheek for the first time in years. "Don't let strangers fill your head," she murmured. "We'll handle this together." I looked at her, then at my father, then at Miss Raskin waiting by the door. I nodded once. Calm. Okay. It was a small word. It sounded like agreement. My mother's face brightened instantly, relief spilling through her carefully applied expression. My father exhaled, like he'd won something. Neither of them saw the way Miss Raskin's eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. A silent check-in, a confirmation that I'd heard everything. I let my parents walk out first. I stayed seated until the door closed behind them. Then I reached into my folder and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with a notification I hadn't opened yet. An email time-stamped 6:43 a.m., sent from an address I didn't recognize, with the subject line, "Your father is already calling banks." I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the subject line, breathing evenly, while Ms. Estella Raskin sat across from me and slid a second separate folder onto the table, thicker than the first, sealed with a simple sticker. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this only after they heard the number," she said. I placed my phone, face down, kept my voice level. "What is it, Ms.?" Raskin's hand rested on the folder for a moment, like she could feel the weight of it through paper. "Receipts," she said. And I didn't react, because I finally understood the kind of fight my grandfather had planned for me to win. I didn't open the folder in Ms. Jasper Raskin's office. That wasn't restraint for show. It was instinct. Important things deserved privacy, not adrenaline. I waited until I was home, my apartment on the fourth floor of a brick building that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old wood. Rent controlled. 2 rooms. Quiet. The kind of place my parents used to call temporary, even after I'd lived there 3 years. I locked the door, set the folder on the kitchen table. Made tea. Only then did I peel the sticker. Inside were copies, not originals. Legal documents, correspondence, timelines, everything labeled. Everything dated. My grandfather had always believed clarity was a form of protection. The first document was a memo from Miss Raskin's firm written 18 months ago. Subject line: Family Risk Assessment, Ashford Estate. I read slowly. It outlined concerns about potential interference from my parents, Elaine and Robert Carter, specifically regarding prior attempts to access funds, pressure tactics used on third parties, and misrepresentation of authority. There were bullet points. 2019. Robert Carter contacted Ashford Holdings' accounting department claiming to act on Harold's behalf. Request denied. Logged 2021. Elaine Carter attempted to obtain medical updates by presenting herself as next of kin, corrected by Hospital Legal. 2023. Joint inquiry made to Zurich Trust Services regarding dormant accounts. Flad Dodd. I exhaled through my nose. No shock, just confirmation. The next section detailed safeguards my grandfather had put in place. Independent trustees, delayed disclosures, compartmentalized access, and then a note at the bottom, written in his handwriting scanned cleanly. They only show up when numbers are spoken aloud. I closed my eyes for a moment, then kept going. There were emails, some between my grandfather and Ms. Stow, Raskin others between my parents, and people they assumed wouldn't talk. One thread was dated 3 weeks before the will reading. From Elaine Carter to privatewealth@bank.com. Subject: Ashford family accounts. Verification she'd written with confidence, using language that implied proximity. We're reviewing family holdings ahead of Harold's passing. Please advise on access requirements. The reply was polite, firm, declining. But she hadn't stopped there. Another email showed her forwarding the bank's response to a different address, adding a note: They're being difficult. Might need pressure. I set that aside and took out my phone. The notification from earlier, the anonymous email, was still there. I opened it now. From burner473@mail.com. Message: Your father called Silverline Trust this morning at 8:11 a.m., claimed you authorized him. He didn't know calls are logged. Thought you should know. Attached was a screenshot. Caller ID, timestamp. Notes field. Caller claimed daughter overwhelmed. Requested temporary access. I didn't feel anger. I felt alignment. This was exactly what my grandfather had anticipated, and he'd left me the map. I forwarded the email to Miss Dat. Raskin with a simple message. Received. I'll document. Then I started a new folder on my laptop. Labeled it Timeline. I didn't confront my parents. I let them come to me. They didn't wait long. That evening, my mother called. No preamble. We need to meet, she said. In person. I'm busy, I replied. A pause, then a softer tone. Lena, don't do this. Not now. Do what? Shut us out. I looked at the kettle cooling on the stove. I'm not shutting anyone out. Another pause. Calculated this time. Good, she said, because your father has ideas. About structuring things efficiently. I'll review anything formal with counsel, I said. Silence stretched, then a small laugh. You've changed. No, I said. I've been consistent. We agreed to lunch 2 days later. Public place. My choice. A restaurant near the river. White tablecloths. Midday crowd. Witnesses without intimacy. They arrived early. My mother stood to hug me. I accepted it briefly. My father shook my hand like we were closing a deal. We ordered. They didn't touch the menu prices. My father leaned back, relaxed. We've been talking, he said, about how best to protect you. I listened. There are predators, my mother added. People who see a young woman alone with that kind of money and think, I'm not alone, I said. I have advisors. Her smile tightened. Advisors don't love you. Love Another word deployed, like leverage. My father slid a manila envelope across the table. "Just a proposal," he said lightly. "I didn't open it yet. It's a temporary power of attorney arrangement," he continued. "Limited scope. Just until you get your footing." "Temporary," my mother echoed. 6 months! "A year, max!" I looked at the envelope, then at them. "Who drafted this?" I asked.
"A friend," my father said. "Too quickly."
I slid the envelope back. "I'll have my attorney review it." My mother's tone sharpened. "Why are you being difficult?" I met her eyes. "I'm not!" She exhaled sharply, then smiled again, performing patience. "You always were stubborn." I made a note of the phrase. After lunch, I scanned the document. It was sloppily written, overbroad. Gave my father authority over all financial instruments, domestic and international. Not temporary. Total. I saved a copy. Logged the date. Added it to the timeline. Over the next 2 weeks, they escalated. Not openly. Casually. My father emailed introductions between me and trusted contacts in private equity, copying people I didn't know and positioning himself as intermediary. My mother started telling extended family that I was overwhelmed and leaning on them heavily. I found out when a cousin texted me congratulations followed by, "Your mom says you're letting them manage things."
What?
I replied politely, asked what exactly she'd said. Screenshot. Saved. Then came the jokes. At a small family dinner, my aunt's birthday, my father raised his glass. "To Lena," he said. "Proof that inheritance skips generations when the middle one is responsible." Laughter. Some uncomfortable. Some genuine, my mother added, smiling. She'd be lost without us. I smiled too. Took a sip of water, made eye contact with my aunt who looked away. After dinner, my mother cornered me near the coat rack. "You could correct them," she said quietly. "All this talk about control, it makes us look bad." I kept my voice even. "I didn't start it. But you could stop it. That was the pattern. Create a narrative. Ask me to clean it up." I didn't. Instead, I documented. Every call, every email, every offhand comment made in public settings. I saved voicemails where my mother referred to our money and texts where my father asked for just a quick signature. They grew bolder. One afternoon, I received a notification from my bank's fraud department. Attempted access detected. Someone had tried to reset credentials using my father's old security answers, things like my childhood dog's name, information he had but no longer had the right to use. The bank blocked it, logged it, asked if I wanted to escalate. "Yes," I said. "Document only." I sent the report to Miss Raskin. Her reply came an hour later. "This aligns with concerns Harold raised. Continue to observe." Observe! That was the word. The key shift happened a week later. My parents invited me to a small gathering at their house, claimed it was just close friends. Celebration. I hesitated, then agreed. Their house hadn't changed. Same gated driveway, same art chosen to impress rather than comfort. But the guest list had a local councilman, 2 business owners, a lifestyle blogger my mother liked, and notably, a man I recognized from one of the emails, someone my father had labeled a structuring consultant. I arrived on time, neutral dress, minimal jewelry, my mother greeted me loudly. "There she is, our girl." Wine glasses clinked. Phones came out. The consultant approached me with a smile that assumed consent. "Your parents tell me you're ready to move assets offshore," he said casually, as if this had already been decided. I looked at my mother. She laughed. "He's joking. He wasn't." I excused myself to the restroom, took out my phone, hit record, slid it back into my bag with the microphone exposed. When I returned, my father was mid-story. "She's very trusting," he was saying. "Always has been." I sat down. The consultant leaned in again. "We'll need your signature soon," he said. "Before regulators tighten things." My father nodded. "Timing matters." I let the silence stretch. Then I asked calmly, "Why would I move assets offshore?" The consultant blinked. My mother jumped in. "For privacy. And taxes," my father added. I nodded slowly. "Who suggested this?" They spoke at once. The recording captured everything. Later that night, As I was leaving, my father followed me to the door. "You embarrassed us," he said quietly. "I didn't say anything," I replied. "That's the problem. I went home, uploaded the audio, labeled it Dinner Offshore Discussion. Lena," she said, "I think it's time you see one more thing." An hour later, an encrypted file arrived. Inside was a document I hadn't expected, a signed affidavit dated 2 years ago. From my grandfather, it detailed a private conversation he'd had with my parents, one where they'd asked him to revise the will in their favor. When he refused, they'd threatened to contest his competence. He'd recorded the meeting. The affidavit referenced the recording. Attached was the transcript. I read it once, then again. Then I leaned back in my chair, hands folded, heart steady. This wasn't just manipulation. It was premeditated, and my grandfather hadn't just anticipated it. He'd preserved it. At the bottom of the transcript was a note from Ms. Raskin. "They don't know this exists." Harold instructed that it be used only if necessary. In public. I closed the file. Outside, traffic moved like it always did. Ordinary. Unaware. Inside, I finally understood the shape of what was coming, and exactly how long I needed to wait before letting the truth speak for itself. The invitation came 3 days later. "Not from my parents directly, from my mother's assistant." Subject line, Ashford Legacy Evening Asrav B. Confirmation the email was glossy even in plain text. Venue listed as the Grand Meridian Hotel. Date set 2 weeks out. Dress code, formal. Purpose, celebrating Harold Ashford's life and legacy. It wasn't a memorial. That had already passed. This was something else. I forwarded the invitation to Miss Raskin. Her response was short. "Their positioning. Proceed carefully." I RSVP'd yes. From that point on, my parents stopped pressuring me privately. No calls asking for signatures. No quick questions. No jokes framed as concern. Instead, they shifted to performance. My mother posted photos online, old ones she'd never shared before, pictures of her and my grandfather at charity events, cropped to remove other people, captions about family bonds and honoring his vision. My father gave an interview to a local business outlet, speaking vaguely about the next generation and continuity. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew. Behind the scenes, they were building a room, and they wanted me in it. 2 days after the RSVP, Miss Raskin asked me to come in again. This time, the meeting included a man from a forensic accounting firm and a woman from a compliance consultancy. Both introduced themselves without ceremony. "We're not here to advise you on emotion," the woman said. "Only sequence." They laid out the landscape.
The event my parents were hosting wasn't just social, it was strategic.
Investors, local officials, media-adjacent guests, people who talked. They intended to present themselves as stewards, steady hands guiding an inexperienced heir. They didn't need my signature yet. They needed my silence and my proximity. I listened, took notes, asked questions. "What happens if I do nothing?" I asked. The accountant answered. "They'll keep speaking for you. And if I correct them publicly?" The woman shook her head. "You'll look reactive, Ms. Aramis." Raskin met my eyes. "Your grandfather anticipated this moment. He believed in timing." I nodded. "Then we wait." Preparation became procedural. We verified every document in my folder, cross-checked timestamps, confirmed chain of custody for the recordings, identified neutral witnesses who could attest to authenticity if needed. We didn't leak. We didn't threaten. We didn't hint. I continued my routine.
Work! Gym!
Groceries. Ordinary life as insulation. My parents, meanwhile, grew louder. A week before the event, my mother called and left a voicemail. "Just checking in," she said brightly. "The planner needs your preferences for the evening. Also, we're thinking you should say a few words. People expect it." I didn't respond. The next day, my father texted. Short remarks would go a long way. Shows unity. I saved both. At work, a colleague asked if I was excited about the gala. The word had already traveled, I smiled politely. "It's an event." The night of the legacy evening arrived, warm and clear. The Grand Meridian's ballroom was all glass and gold, floor-to-ceiling windows, chandeliers designed to sparkle without warmth. Staff moved efficiently. Security was discreet but visible. I arrived alone. My mother spotted me immediately. She crossed the room with practiced urgency, air kissing my cheek. "You look beautiful," she said. "I'm so glad you came early." My father joined us, placing a hand lightly on my back as if guiding me. Cameras flashed from somewhere near the bar. "Everything's set," he said. "We'll start in 20 minutes. I scanned the room, recognized faces from the emails. "The consultant was there! The councilman!" A journalist I'd seen my father speak to before. There was also a small stage, podium-centered, with a backdrop bearing the Ashford name in tasteful serif lettering. I took my seat at the front table. My name card was placed between my parents. They'd arranged it so no one could miss the picture. As guests filtered in, people approached me with congratulations and assumptions. "You're lucky to have such experienced parents," one man said. "Family leadership matters," another added. My mother smiled at each comment like she'd earned it. When the lights dimmed, my father stood and approached the podium. He spoke smoothly. "About legacy. About responsibility. About values passed down." He mentioned me once, referring to my daughter, who will carry this forward with our explained guidance. "Explained." My mother followed, voice soft, emotional in controlled doses. "Harold believed in family," she said, "and he believed in protecting what he built." I watched faces in the crowd nod along. Then my mother turned toward me, hand extended. "Lena," she said, "would you like to say something?" The room went quiet. All eyes shifted. This was the moment they'd planned for. The visual confirmation. The heir endorsing the narrative. I stood. I didn't go to the podium. I stayed where I was, hands relaxed at my sides. "I hadn't planned remarks," I said calmly, "but I do want to clarify something." A ripple of attention moved through the room. My father's smile tightened. My mother froze, hands still extended. "I've heard a lot tonight about unity and guidance," I continued. "Before we go further, I think it's important to be precise." Ms. Raskin stepped into view near the side of the room. So did the compliance consultant, quiet, observant. "I'm grateful to everyone who came to honor my grandfather," I said. He valued transparency. My father stepped closer to the stage. "Nina," he said softly into the microphone. "This isn't the time." I met his eyes. "It is." I reached into my clutch and removed my phone. "I won't speak long," I said. "But I want to make sure we're all working from the same facts." A hush settled. Oh, phones lifted discreetly. I tapped my screen. 2 weeks ago," I said, "there was a private dinner at my parents' home. During that dinner, a proposal was made to move trust assets offshore." The consultant shifted uncomfortably. "I asked why," I continued, "and who suggested it." My mother laughed lightly, trying to diffuse. "This is inappropriate." I didn't raise my voice. "I have a recording," I said. "Made that night." Miss Raskin stepped forward. "For clarity," she said, addressing the room, "Miss Dinkapole!" Carter is the executor designate and is within her rights to disclose material discussions related to the estate. My father's face drained of color. I held up my phone. "I won't play it unless necessary. But it exists, it's time-stamped, and it's logged." The room buzzed. "This isn't about embarrassment," I said. "It's about accuracy." I turned slightly, addressing the guests instead of my parents. "There have also been attempts to access accounts without authorization," I said. "Those attempts were logged by financial institutions." My father shook his head. "This is a misunderstanding." I nodded once. "That's why documentation matters." I gestured to Miss Raskin. She stepped forward and held up a single page. "This is an affidavit executed by Harold Ashford 2 years ago," she said. "It details a meeting in which pressure was applied to alter his estate plans." Gasps. Murmurs. My mother's hand dropped. "The affidavit references a recording," Ms. Raskin continued, "which we have. It has been verified." My father opened his mouth, closed it. I took a breath. "There's more," I said. "But this isn't a trial. This is a room full of people who deserve clarity before assumptions become contracts." I looked at my parents. I won't be managed, I said calmly, and I won't misrepresent my grandfather's intentions. Silence pressed in from all sides. My mother's voice came out thin. You're doing this here! Yes, I said, because this is where the narrative was being set. I turned back to the room. Effective immediately, I said. All communications regarding the Ashford estate will go through my counsel. Any representations otherwise are inaccurate. I didn't add anything else. I stepped back and sat down. The room didn't erupt. It fractured. Whispers. People checking phones. A journalist already typing. My father stood frozen at the podium, hands gripping the edge. My mother stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Because the exposure wasn't finished yet, and what came next would make silence impossible. The silence didn't last. It never does when facts enter a room built on assumptions. A man near the back, one of the business owners my father had introduced as a longtime partner, cleared his throat. Are you saying, he asked carefully, that representations made tonight weren't authorized? Yes, I said. That's exactly what I'm saying. My voice didn't carry anger. It didn't need to. Ms. Halcock matches. Raskin stepped forward again, this time holding a thin tablet. For the avoidance of doubt, she said, I'm prepared to distribute written notices to all relevant parties present, confirming Miss Carter's sole authority as executor designate and primary beneficiary, effective as of today. She looked at me. I nodded. The notices went out digitally before anyone could interrupt. Phones buzzed across the ballroom like a coordinated response. My father finally spoke, voice strained but measured. This is being taken out of context. I looked at him. Then context will help. Monsieur Circe, Raskin tapped the tablet once. The large screen behind the stage, previously looping a tasteful slideshow of my grandfather's philanthropic work, went dark. Then text appeared. Transcript excerpt. Recorded meeting, April 2024. My mother gasped quietly. Miss Raskin read aloud, her tone flat, unembellished. Elaine Carter, if you don't update the will, we'll have to question whether you're capable of making these decisions anymore. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Robert Carter, we're trying to protect the family. This doesn't have to get ugly. The words hung there, stripped of charm. Ms. Beckett, Raskin continued, the full recording is available for review by any regulatory body or court with standing. My father stepped back from the podium as if it no longer recognized him. A woman near the front, one of the foundation board members, stood. Why are we hearing this now? I answered, before Miss Raskin could. Because until tonight, there was no public misrepresentation that required correction. That landed.
The councilman shifted uncomfortably. The consultant avoided eye contact entirely.
My mother tried one last time, turning toward the room with a practiced look of wounded dignity. This is a family matter, she said. It shouldn't be handled like this. I stood again, slowly. It became a public matter, I said, when my authority was publicly implied, reassigned, and spoken over. I let the words settle. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone, I continued. I came to stop misinformation from becoming infrastructure. No one laughed. No one clapped. They didn't need to. The consequences started small and then spread. The journalist left early, not abruptly, efficiently. Two guests quietly excused themselves and spoke to Miss Raskin near the exit, asking for clarification on previous conversations they'd had with my parents. Clarification that now mattered. The consultant slipped out without saying goodbye. My father attempted to regroup, pulling my mother aside. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. Within 24 hours, the story shifted. Not sensational, precise. Headlines didn't scream. They corrected. Ashford Estate clarifies governance. After misstatements at legacy event, executor asserts authority. Council confirms documentation. No accusations, no drama. Just facts replacing narrative. Banks followed protocol. Access points were locked down further. A formal notice went out to all institutions involved, reiterating that any attempted interference would be documented and escalated. My parents' names began appearing in places they didn't want them to. Compliance logs, internal emails, do not engage without council present notes. They called me once more. I didn't answer. They sent a joint email the next day. We need to talk privately. This has gone too far. I forwarded it to Miss Carassa. Raskin.
Her reply came back within minutes.
No response required. A week later, I received confirmation that my father's informal advisory roles with 2 firms had been confirmably paused pending review. The word choice was careful, the meaning wasn't.
My mother's social media accounts went quiet. No more legacy posts.
No more cropped photos. People stopped asking me how my parents were handling things. They started asking me how I was. The estate work continued, methodical and unglamorous.
Meetings.
Filings, audits. I learned more in 3 months than I had in the previous 10 years. About governance, about power, about how quickly confidence dissolves when it isn't backed by authority. I didn't rush anything. When my parents attempted to contest a minor procedural detail, nothing substantial, just noise, it was dismissed without a hearing. The affidavit and recordings existed. The pattern was documented. Their attorney advised them to stop. They did. The last time I saw them was 6 months later, at a required mediation session related to a separate family trust that held nothing of consequence. My mother looked smaller. My father looked tired. "No one!" yelled. No one apologized. At the end, my attorney asked if I wanted to add anything to the record. I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said. "That all future communication go through counsel only." It was granted. After that, my life grew quieter. Intentionally. I moved to a different apartment. Not bigger, just better suited. More light. Fewer assumptions. I kept my job longer than people expected. Left on my own terms. Built a team slowly, carefully. I honored my grandfather the way he'd actually lived. By funding systems, not spotlights. By backing people who didn't need to announce themselves. Sometimes I think about the night of the legacy evening, not with satisfaction. With clarity. My parents didn't lose because I outplayed them. They lost because they mistook access for entitlement, proximity for power, and silence for weakness. I never raised my voice. I never chased revenge. I just stopped letting other people speak for me, and that turned out to be more than enough.